Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when personal hygiene was optional. We're talking about medieval Europe, where you, a humble peasant, bathe once a year if the stars align, the cows behave, and your neighbor doesn't borrow the only bucket in town. Don't worry, we'll ease you into this hastened life with some gently delivered facts, a few historical debates, and just enough jokes to keep things cozy. You'll learn about what passed for soap, how washing became suspicious, and why your village's one public bathhouse is somehow also the local dating scene. So close your eyes, settle into your blankets, and let's drift off into the oddly soothing misery of medieval cleanliness. I'll do the dirty work so you can just relax. Let's begin. You wake up on a straw mattress. If we're being generous with the word mattress, it has more like a flattened pile of moldy reeds you've been sleeping on since the harvest. It smells faintly of mildew, strongly of sheep, and somehow still manages to itch. You're a peasant in late 13th century Europe, and no, this isn't a dream, it's your life. And unfortunately, you've woken up with fleas again. Your hut is small, one room, and shared with 6 other humans plus a few chickens, and if it's winter, probably the family goat. There's no chimney, so the smoke from last night's fire still hangs in the air like a ghost that is terrible at exits. The floor is packed dirt, except for that one corner where someone tried to be fancy and spread straw, which now functions mostly as a toilet for the aforementioned goat. You scratch at your shoulder. That's not a bug bite it. It's just the scratchy wool tunic that hasn't been washed since last Michaelmas. You don't exactly have a wardrobe. You own 2 garments. One for working and one for when the bishop visits and you re-expected to pretend. You aren't slowly composting in your own skin. Now, let's address the air. It's not fresh. You smell of smoke, sweat, onions, and something sour you can't identify. Your neighbors smell the same, which is convenient. Everyone's so equally pungent. It's created a kind of equilibrium. There's no shame in it. In fact, cleanliness is a bit suspicious. Why are you suddenly all scrubbed up? Got something to hide. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Today is not bath day, don't be silly. It's Tuesday, and Tuesdays are for threshing barley, not indulging in extravagant rituals like washing your feet. You shuffle outside and do your best to rinse your face in the communal bucket near the well. The water's technically clear, but it's also been used for 3 things already today. Rinsing radishes, wetting laundry, and possibly baptizing a chicken. It's fine. You splash it on your cheeks, it's bracing. You feel no different. There's a faint memory in your mind of the last time you really bathed. It might have been at Whitsun nearly 8 months ago, when you visited your cousin's village and they had a tub, an actual tub. It was made of wood. The water was lukewarm, and there was a dog watching you the entire time. But still, luxury. That one bath probably rid you of 20% of your lice population. The other 80% are veterans now, grizzled survivors, practically family. But back to your day. Hygiene as you know it is mostly preventative. You scrape mud off your legs before bed. You try not to share your pillow with too many rodents. You occasionally rinse your hands before meals if it's a feast day. Your fingernails are black, but so are everyone else's. And believe it or not, this is considered acceptable, noble, even you, the noble. There's an old widow in the village who claims bathing too often weakens the body. She says water opens the pores and lets in bad air, the kind that causes humors to misalign. She once got a cough for 3 months after sitting in a puddle too long, so she knows what she's talking about. You nod when she speaks. Everyone does. You don't want to be accused of inviting disease through overcleansing. That's practically witchcraft. Meanwhile, your neighbor Reginald insists that he washes his feet every full moon. His wife confirms this with a long, weary sigh. You're not sure if that's admirable or concerning. You make a mental note to check the moon phase before sitting too close to him next market day. Still, you do your best. You scrape dirt from behind your ears with a sliver of old wood. You occasionally chew mint leaves when the parish priest is around. And your one indulgence, if you can afford it, he's rubbing a bit of lavender on your wrists during Easter. It masks the barnyard odor for at least 6 minutes. As evening falls, you lie back down on your itchy, damp straw and wonder, will this be the year you get a second bath? Maybe after the next harvest. Maybe if you don't owe too many eggs to the reeve. Maybe if it rains on the right saint's day and someone remembers to heat water. A lot has to go right. But for now, you're content. You're not itchy enough to be alarmed. And that's a win. Besides, tomorrow's Wednesday and that means it's pig gutting day. You'll want to be good and dirty for that. You wake up the next morning and try to stretch, only to discover your knees are stuck together with a combination of dried sweat and something that might be barley husk. The sun filters weakly through the cracks in the wooden slats above you. It's time to start your daily ritual, what passes for washing in your world. Spoiler, it doesn't involve water. Welcome to the world of dry bathing. Yes, that's a real thing. You grab a handful of straw, not fresh straw. This is last season's crumbly, mildly fungal batch and use it to rub down your arms and neck. The goal here is not to get clean, but to knock off the worst of the surface grime. You've heard that ash works too, but your family's hearth was only lit long enough to char some onions last night, so ash is in short supply. Your mother swears by the ash method. She calls it scrubbing with God's soap. She once tried to mix ash and pig lard to make something approximating soap, but it ended up as a greasy gray mush that gave your uncle a rash. That batch now lives behind the firewood and doubles as mouse repellent. You try to scrape your fingernails on a stone. It's not particularly effective, but it makes you feel virtuous. Cleanliness, after all, is next to godliness, or at least not being kicked out of church for stinking up the pew. The idea of washing varies wildly, even from village to village. Some folks believe rubbing yourself with a rough cloth is enough to please St. Lawrence, the patron saint of cooks, laundresses, and somehow itchy elbows. Other villagers insist on dousing babies in cold water to toughen them up, but everyone over age 5 avoids full immersion like it's the plague. Which, to be fair, it sometimes is. You remember once overhearing a noble talk about bathing in rose water. You thought that sounded lovely until someone explained that rose water doesn't actually clean anything. It just makes your filth smell like anxiety and flowers. Great for poetry, bad for lice, and about the lice who are never alone. Ever. They are with you in your hood, your underclothes, your bed. You sometimes try to comb them out with a handmade nip carved by your cousin who also makes spoons and once accidentally created a cursed whistle. You kill what you can. The rest, you name. Albert lives behind your ear now. He pays no rent. Sometimes, when things get really desperate, your whole household undergoes a kind of dry delousing. Everyone strips down, holds up their clothes to the fire, and watches the lice pop like kernels of corn. It's weirdly festive, and no one talks about it afterward, like medieval Thanksgiving. But with more water, of course, exists. There's a stream down the hill. You're allowed to fetch it for cooking or feeding animals, but woe unto the fool who uses it recreation. For one, it's freezing. For another, people downstream use that water for things you'd rather not think about. Remember when the miller's boy tossed a sheep carcass in last summer? No one does laundry downstream from that anymore. Or drinks it. Or makes soup. But it still gets used for other things. It's the circle of live ... and parasites. There are buckets, but buckets are precious. Made from wood and bound with iron hoops. There are heirlooms. Your cousin's family has one named Gertrude. They only use her on feast days. You once borrowed her without asking, and they didn't speak to you until camp. Some people say the townsfolk have washing tubs. That's true. But town is a 3-day walk away, and those tubs are mostly for laundry. Or, on rare occasions, bathing the corpse of someone very important. But you live in a hamlet, and your options are rinsed, scrape, dust, or despair. Even the concept of a bath is suspicious. People say that water opens your pores, and then the bad humors can sneak in. Others argue that soap scrubs away the natural oils God gave you to protect against evil vapors. There is even an old tale about a woman who bathed weekly and was struck down by a lightning bolt while reaching for a turnip. Correlation? Possibly, but no one's taking chances. Your great-aunt claims she once saw a knight who bathed twice in 1 week. She says he smelled like roses and betrayal. He also had gout. So the moral is, cleanliness leads to weakness. She's very passionate about this. Still, you do take pride in small gestures. A cloth dipped in warm ale for wiping your face. A splash of vinegar under the arms to confuse the flies. On truly special days, you might boil herbs and inhale the steam, pretending you're in a bathhouse in Paris instead of a shed that leaks when a goat sneezes. You remember one time a traveling friar gave a sermon about spiritual cleansing and half the villagers misheard it as soap for your soul. For weeks, people were trying to cleanse their sins by rubbing themselves with mint and thyme. The priest was not amused, nor was the mint. But this is your life. This is how you bathe without water, without soap, without apology. You do your best with dust, cloth, and hope. And when your skin itches, you pray it's just fleas and not another fungal situation like last autumn. Because if it is, you'll have to borrow Gertrude again. It's a feast day, or is it a fasting day? You're not entirely sure because the village calendar is written on the side of a barn in what used to be pig's blood, and the ink's faded since Father Thomas tripped into the goose pond last Advent. But the bell rings differently this morning's, low and echoing in. Someone's holding out the big cross. That means something holy is happening, which also means, for you, something rare. Access to actual water for something resembling a bath. Sort of. See, today, the church allows, and even encourages, a light washing. Not because cleanliness is next to godliness, mind you, but because too much body stink during Easter Mass tends to make the bishop faint. So you seize the chance to pretend you're fancy for the day. You don't have soap, but you do have a rag that used to be white and a bowl of slightly warmed well water. This is the medieval equivalent of a spa package. You rub your face, under your arms, and behind your ears. You do not disrobe completely. That would be scandalous, if not straight up illegal. Full nakedness is only reserved for childbirth, death, or demon exorcisms. You know, the big three. As you scrub at a stubborn spot of dirt that might actually be part of your skin now, you try to remember all the rules. It's Lent, so bathing too enthusiastically might be seen as indulgent, but not bathing at all might draw the ire of Brother Gregory, who already thinks you're a bit too cheerful for someone in your tax bracket. To make things worse, you're re-wearing your penitential shirt, a scratchy linen garment you were supposed to put on to remind yourself that life is suffering. It's working. The seams chafe your ribs, the collar's tight, and the whole thing smells like it was once stored in a crypt. But that's kind of the point, and it's not just about you. The church calendar shapes the entire rhythm of village bathing or lack thereof. During holy festivals, washing becomes a moral symbol. During fasting seasons, you're supposed to avoid bodily pleasures entirely, and according to one monk who visited from York, even warm water might be construed as a temptation, so you try not to enjoy it too much. One time your cousin Agnes giggled while rinsing her hair before Pentecost and was promptly assigned 7 hours of kneeling on grain sacks for frivolous use of blessed water. She still complains that her knees have never forgiven her. Bathing is also tangled up with medieval understandings of health. The 4 humus blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile must be kept in balance, or else you get leprosy or melancholia or both. Bathing, some say, loosens the humors, allowing disease to sneak in. Others think a proper washing can rebalance them, but only if followed by a dinner of cabbage, trout, and spelt wine vinegar. Honestly, it's a bit of a gamble either way. Meanwhile, on the secular front, your lord and lady are hosting a feast in 3 days, and rumor has it they've asked the serfs to look tidy. That means at least one face splashing and possibly hold on to your hose of foot rinse. You haven't rinsed your feet since the great goose escape of 3 summers ago, when you lost a boot in dignity in equal measure. And speaking of dignity, there's always the awkward ritual of pre-mass cleansing. You line up outside the little side chapel where a barrel of rainwater has been set out by the altar boys. Everyone takes a turn dipping a cloth in it and dabbing their foreheads. By the time it's your turn, the water has changed color twice and smells faintly of cabbage, but you give it your best effort. You recall an old story from a traveling peddler. He said in Jerusalem, people bathe in pure marble tubs filled with rosewater and milk. You wonder what milk costs there. Here, a pint is worth a morning's labor, and you're not wasting it on your elbows. Still, every now and then, someone tries to reinvent the system. That young mason's apprentice, Owen, once claimed he'd figured out a cleansing steam method by heating stones in a pit and sitting nearby. He called it sweat logic. Unfortunately, it caused the haystack next to his hut to catch fire, and he was exiled to his aunt's goat shed for the season. Bold of him, really. All of this is complicated by the fact that your clothes are nearly impossible to clean. They're made of wool, or possibly wool's angrier cousin, and they don't respond well to water. You can rinse them, but then they smell like wet dog and take 3 days to dry. You tried airing them out once, but the wind carried them into the neighbor's field and a pig nested in them. The pig was not pleased. Still, there's a kind of ritual to it all. You wash, you scratch, you complain, you dry yourself with a patch of sackcloth, and then you go to mass feeling 4% more like a civilized human and 96% more like a moist sack of bread. You sit through the Latin hymns trying not to fidget, listening to Father Thomas drone on about the dangers of vanity and the virtue of humility. You resist the urge to scratch your scalp. Even though it's screaming with post-wash rebellion, you exchange glances with Agnes, who is clearly fighting the same battle. And then, as the incense fills the nave and the choir sings its slow, droning chants, you realize that, for the first time in months, you don't reek of goat, just mildly of turnip. And that, in your world, is practically royal. The rumors begin at dawn, the bathhouses open. You're not sure who decides these things, but someone saw smoke rising from the clay chimney near the edge of the village, where the path forks toward the mill and the overgrown shrine to St. Mildredan. That means one thing. Water is being heated, which means steam, which means bathing. Not metaphorical washing, not dry, but honest to goodness water on skin. It's been over a year since your last full body soak. You still remember it in detail. The sound of boiling water in the great copper pot, the way your feet turned pink from the heat, and the smell half herbs, half mildew, and a faint hint of regret. But it was glorious. The bathhouse isn't fancy. It's essentially a wooden hut reinforced with clay and thatch, built decades ago by someone with questionable taste in architecture but a noble dream. It leans slightly to one side and always smells vaguely of wet onions, even when empty. But to you it might as well be a castle. You arrive early, clutching your bundle of bath supplies. A coarse linen towel, a wooden comb, and a dried bunch of meadow sweet someone told you was good for odors. You also bring your oldest under tunic, because public nudity is frowned upon. But wet wool is better than scandal. Inside, it's dimly lit by tallow candles jammed into beetroot jars. Steam curls along the low ceiling beams. There is a huge wooden tub in the center big enough for 3 adults if everyone pretends they like each other, and a long bench along one wall where people sit and gossip while waiting their turn. You sit down, already sweating. The heat is overwhelming. Like a smoky hug you can't escape. Someone's thrown juniper branches on the fire, and it smells sharp and piney, masking the usual aroma of old feet and damp moss. Then comes the hard part. conversation. Bathhouses, you see, are not just for bathing, they're social, which is fine, except you're half naked and being asked about your cabbage yields. Reginald is there, of course. He's got opinions on everything. Why the Reeves donkey's plotting against him, which saints secretly prefer barley over wheat, and why people who dry their hair facing east are inviting misfortune. You nod politely, mostly to avoid having to speak while scrubbing your knees. The water's hot, surprisingly so. Someone clearly took their job seriously. It's been hauled bucket by bucket from the well, boiled in great kettles, and poured into the tub until the surface shimmered. You ease into it slowly, flinching like a frog with opinions. Your skin hasn't felt this much temperature variation in months, possibly ever. Once you're in, you let out an involuntary sigh. It echoes. Everyone looks at you. You try to pretend you were just clearing your throat very meaningfully. The tub water's communal, which means you're sharing it with everyone who came before you. You try not to think about that. You focus on your elbows, which haven't seen soap in 6 moons. You focus on your toes, which are currently molting like ancient sea creatures. You focus on the sensation of grime releasing itself from your body like sins before a papal pardon. Someone hands you a cloth with a generous smear of animal fat and Ash's homebrewed soap. It smells like someone tried to make stew from boiled boots and rosemary. It lathers, barely, and you work it over your arms with the urgency of a man trying to remove the past year cigarettes. You discover muscles you forgot you had. You also discover a tick. You name him Bernard and politely evict him. There's a moment, about halfway through, when you close your eyes, the steam rises gently. The murmur of voices turns into a low lullaby of peasant gossip and fire crackles. The world narrows to heat, breath, and soft water slapping against wood. It is oddly peaceful until someone slips getting out of the tub and lands with a squelch that shakes the bench. You open one eye. Reginald has fallen. Again. Eventually your time's up. You climb out gingerly, dripping and unsure how limbs are supposed to work outside water. You dry off with your linen rag, which feels about as absorbent as a handful of flour. But it's something. Your skin is pink and cleanish. You feel lighter, freer, slightly steamed, like a dumpling. You sit on the bench, cooling off, and listen to the chatter. There's talk of the harvest, of a lost sheep that turned up in the churchyard, and of a merchant who once bathed twice in the same week and now walks with a limp. You're reminded again how rare this is, how precious, how fleeting. As you wrap your damp tunic around yourself, someone starts passing out garlic cloves and elderflower tea. It's tradition, apparently. Something about keeping out chills and evil spirits. You don't question it. You eat your garlic, sip your tea, and try not to sneeze. And as you step back out into the fading daylight, you realize something magical. You smell only mildly of goats. The air feels different on your skin. The dirt beneath your nails is gone, replaced by the faint sting of soap and possibly hope. You walk home slowly, basking in your annual clean, Python copy edit. Your glorious squeaky clean state lasts approximately 27 hours. By the second morning, you're back in your usual scent profile somewhere between haystack and boiled sock butt. For a brief and shining window, you were the most respectable smelling peasant in 3 hamlets. And now the bath tax collector is knocking on your door with a grin that says, I know where you've been soaking. Yes, the bath tax you thought bathing was a luxury, it is, but it's also taxable. In fact, any gathering involving warmth, comfort, or buckets of any kind seems to attract the local reeve like a moth to a lukewarm flame. You open the door and find him standing there with his leather ledger, which has never once brought good news. He asks if you or any member of your household recently used the public bathhouse. You pause, think deny everything. He writes your name down anyway. That'll be 2 eggs, a turnip, and your next 3 spoonfuls of salt, he says cheerfully, as if that isn't most of your winter food security. You nod and thank him, because you were raised properly, and you close the door with a quiet sigh. Next time, you might have to bathe under cover of darkness, like some kind of morally ambiguous forest wizard. Soap, too, is taxed. Well, not officially, but anyone found producing suspiciously fragrant substances is expected to donate a portion to the manor house, which in real terms means Lady Cecily wants to smell better than you at all times. She bathes more often, they say monthly even. She has perfumed oils from the east and probably Dosen tea. Share her water with 3 sweaty neighbors and a half-plucked chicken. You tried to make your own soap once. Remember, you mixed tallow with lye and boiled it for hours. The result was a grey brick that smelled like panic and smoked onions. Still, it lathered belly. Your sister used it on her boots. You still count that as a win. But soap ingredients cost money: wood ash, animal fat, fragrant herbs if you're feeling spicy, and most of your resources go toward things like not starving. So most folks rely on nature's cleaners. Sand, salt, vinegar, or praying very hard while scrubbing with bark. Beyond taxes and soap scarcity, there's the issue of opinions. Everyone's got one. The village healer insists too much bathing weakens your essence. She claims to have read it in a manuscript. She also claims to have treated a man for ghost possession with garlic and wine, so her credibility's flexible, Your cousin, on the other hand, is in the bathing as courtship camp. She says a man once noticed her clean fingernails and offered her a whole pair. A pair scandalous. Since then, she scrubs her hands with gravel every Sunday and waits near the market with hopeful eyes. She's still waiting. Meanwhile, the Reeve's son has started patrolling the village paths in case someone is illegally boiling water. This is partly a tax enforcement effort and partly boredom. He once fined a boy for trying to make mint tea and called it culinary fraud. The boy was 5, the tea was mostly weeds. You begin to wonder, was the bath worth it? Your hair's tangled again. Your skin, you walked through a puddle this morning that may or may not have previously hosted a dead frog. The world is returning to its usual state of damp confusion. Worse, there is a rumor going around that the last person to use the tub has developed a cough. Not a dramatic I've been cursed by St. Dunstan kind of cough, just a normal one. But in medieval terms, any cough is a scandal. Was the water cursed? Was it too hot? Was there bad moon alignment? Someone suggests the tub might have been too clean, removing the protective grime layer we all rely on. Reginald agrees. He claims his rash only ever flares up when he smells lavender. This proves nothing, but everyone nods gravely. A few days later, the bathhouse mysteriously closes for repairs. No one saw anything break. But the firewood pile is gone, and the door is nailed shut with an angry note. Closed until Lent. By order of sanitation and divine timing. The words divine timing are underlined 3 times. That's practically a threat. And so you return to your usual methods. Rubbing down with straw, whispering apologies to your armpits, wearing your cloak in the rain and pretending that counts as a rinse. The shine is gone. The bath is a memory now. A slippery, fragrant, glorious memory. And you're once again a walking tapestry of crusted wool and earthy aroma. Next year, you'll plan better. Save up. Hide some soap. Maybe even bribe the Reeve with pickled beets. Because for all the hassle, the gossip, the taxes, and the lukewarm garlic tea, those 27 clean hours were magic. And frankly, you deserve magic. You're sitting on a tree stump, watching a beetle crawl up your boot. When it hits you, you're dirty again. Not just garden variety muddy. You've re-entered that special category of grime reserved for people who sleep in wool and work in manure. The bathhouse is still closed, your soap stash has gone missing, and you're beginning to suspect that you'll spend the rest of your natural life gently fermenting in your own personal ecosystem. But here's the thing, you're not alone. In fact, you're doing exactly what most respectable peasants do, wearing your dirt like a badge of social normalcy. In your world, to be clean all the time is to be suspicious. What are you trying to prove? Why are you washing away your modesty? Are you pretending to be noble? Whereas are you trying to become noble? That's not just laughable, that's potentially heretical. Dirt is the great equalizer. Your lord may ride by in polished boots, but you know for a fact that under his embroidered tunic is a man who smells like boiled pheasant and chainmail mildew. At least your stink is honest. It comes from labor, not luxury, from sowing turnips, not sipping spiced wine. In fact, the dirtiest people are often the most respected, like old Thomas, the village smith. He hasn't washed since the last comet passed overhead, and yet everyone goes to him when they need a horseshoe or a blessed iron charm to ward off nightmares. Clean hands, he grumbles. Make soft minds. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds impressive when he says it. Even clothing reflects this mindset. You don't own white linen, not because you can't afford it, but because white shows things like grime, things like blood, things like the consequences of falling into the pig trough last week while chasing your cousin's runaway goose. You prefer muted colors, brown, gray, and that indefinite greenish hue that comes from never rinsing your tunic and storing it next to a damp turnip. And then there's perfume. That's noble nonsense. Everyone knows the only reason nobles wear perfumes is because they don't trust their own stink. You, on the other hand, embrace it. You occasionally dab garlic oil on your wrists. Not for scent, but for scent. It's not that people never try to be clean. There are moments, weddings, funerals, plague season. But cleanliness is more symbolic than literal washing your hands in a basin before a meal, even if they were already filthy. Rinsing your face with blessed water before a feast, even if your beard still contains half of last week's stew. But mostly, dirt is protective. It's insulation. It's camouflage. It's identity. Remember when that traveling noble steward came through last harvest, trying to organize the peasants into neat categories? He called you all agrarian labor units and recommended weekly bathing to increase productivity. You all nodded politely while hiding your bath rags and quietly nicknaming him Sir Sopatom. There's also the matter of marriage. Cleanliness in a potential spouse is nice, sure, but too much of it is worrisome. What are they hiding under all that rosemary water? Why don't they smell like sheep and hard work? Are they lazy? Are they vain? Are they secretly French? Your cousin once courted a girl who washed her hair with chamomile every month. She was beautiful, she was fragrant, she was deeply mistrusted. When she moved to the next village and married a barrel maker, Everyone agreed it was for the best. You want a spouse you can trust to help muck the stable, not one who cries when their soap gets soggy. Even the animals get it. The cleaner the pig, the sicker it probably is. The fluffier the chicken, the more likely it's about to drop dead. Dirt means life. Dirt means vigor. Dirt means you've been doing something. But sometimes, just sometimes, you miss it. That feeling of water trickling down your back. The warmth of the steam on your knuckles. The brief moment where your skin felt like yours again. Not just a sponge for the elements. You lie awake some nights imagining it. A warm bath. Your own soap. Maybe a scented cloth if you're really dreaming big. No one else in the tub. No reeve collecting taxes. Just you and the water. Then you roll over and feel the crunch of straw under your shoulder and remember who you are. You're a medieval peasant. You have dirt in your ears, lint in your tunic, and pride in your soil-stained fingertips. You drift back to sleep, dreaming of garlic oil and the dignity of being very It's midsummer now, and you've stopped pretending your clothes are going to dry. There's a thunderstorm every third day. The roads are a soup of mud and horse droppings, and even the geese look defeated. You step outside and your foot sinks 3 inches into yesterday's puddle. A familiar feeling rises in your chest. Not despair, exactly just a sort of soggy resignation. And then someone sneezes. Not a little dainty sneeze. A whole body, terrifying sneeze from down by the blacksmith's hut, followed by a coughing fit that sounds suspiciously plaguey. A few villagers cross themselves. Reginald mutters something about the rats again. You nod solemnly, though you don't quite know what that means. You just cleaned your feet last week in a ditch that didn't even smell too bad. And now this. Typical. You've heard stories, of course, of towns where half the people drop dead in a week, of red swellings under the armpits, of mysterious smells and unlucky breezes. The Black Death, they call it, or God's finger. If you're feeling dramatic, you try not to panic, but you've also heard people blame the bath. Yes, the very same bathhouses that were once a rare indulgence are now accused of spreading disease. Apparently, warm water opens your pores, and bad air creeps in. Never mind that bad air is a concept no one can quite explain. The logic goes like this. Steam leads to moisture. Moisture leads to miasma. Miasma leads to boils. Boils lead to death. Therefore, bathing equals death. Simple. You begin to understand why your grandmother always warned against washing both feet at once. If the devil sees 2 clean heels, she'd whisper, he'll follow you home. This was once quaint. Now it's terrifying. People stop going to the stream. They avoid the well unless it's absolutely necessary. The bathhouse, still technically closed for repairs, is now rumored to be cursed. Someone saw a crow land on the roof. That's enough evidence to seal the place up with wax and prayers. You of course haven't bathed since spring, so you figure you're reasonably safe. No open pores here, just layers of hard-earned protective crust. Your personal stink is practically a defense mechanism now. You like to think of it as medieval hand sanitizer. Still, the mood in the village shifts. People start whispering more. Neighbors keep extra distance. Father Thomas preaches a sermon about how cleanliness might provoke God's wrath, or possibly the fleas. It's hard to follow. He has a head cold. Ironically, everyone is dirtier than ever. No one wants to risk washing away the natural barriers. Agnes proudly announces she's going for a no-rinse year. Her hair now resembles a very determined bird's nest. Reginald claims his filth keeps demons confused. You believe him, mostly because something definitely lives in his boots. But even with all the fear, even with all the superstition, the illness comes. It starts slow. A cough here, a fever there. Then the baker's assistant collapses. Then 2 sheep die suddenly. And though everyone swears sheep can't catch the plague, it still feels symbolic. People panic. Someone burns a wheelbarrow full of dried herbs in the middle of the green. You cough, once, and the cobbler throws garlic at you. There's no bath that can fix this. Still, you find yourself dreaming of it again. A warm soak, steam curling through the air, clean skin, free from fleas, dirt, and dread. You know it won't cure the plague, it might even be dangerous, but the idea of shedding this year's filthy vaunt for a moment feels oddly hopeful. You gather a bucket, heat some water over the hearth. No one's watching. You carry it behind the hut, where the nettles grow and no one goes unless they've lost a chicken, or their sense of pride. You dip your feet in. The water's hot, not scalding. You feel the grime loosen. You wiggle your toes and sigh quietly. Maybe it's foolish. Maybe it's brave. Maybe it's just what a person does after months of carrying other people's turnips, coughing in their sleep, and pretending dirt makes them invincible. You tip the bucket out and return inside, where your damp feet squeak against the floor and the world feels just a little less heavy. You're still a medieval peasant. You still stink. But for one evening, you're also clean just enough to remember what it feels like to be human. And in these times, that's everything.